So for the last few months, I've been looking into using ColdFusion and Hotwire together, but for the most part, I've been looking at the happy paths, that is the what happens when everything goes right. And I wanted to start to look at the so-called sad paths, or what happens when things go wrong. And I wanted to look into handling 401 unauthorized errors. So imagine a user has logged into an application and they're clicking around within the application, and then maybe their session times out or they clear their cookies and they click on a link that represents an unauthorized request. What do? Do we redirect them to the login? Do we show them a message? And that's what I wanted to start to think about. Now, in a vanilla ColdFusion application, handling an unauthorized request is relatively straightforward because you're always doing full page requests. But once you're in the context of Hotwire, things get a little bit more complicated, because if you look at this page, it's not just a page. We have our page, and then our red dotted line here is actually a turbo frame. And you can see that we're doing a turbo frame here. And so this is the same set of navigation links here. You can see I'm going, here's my home, here's my activity, here's my profile. I can do the same thing inside the frame, and you'll see that this is now being scoped to the frame itself. So at the top level, when I go to an unauthorized page, let's look at the network activity here. What I can do is I can hit that page and I can just do a 302 found and redirect the user to the login page. But if I'm in the context of a frame, I can't really do that, or it won't have the same effect because that navigation is going to be scoped to the turbo frame itself. So in that case, one possible thing that we can do is just show the user a message in the context of that turbo frame. You've been logged out, and you can see we get the 401 unauthorized here. And we can see here in the response, it's the turbo frame response with the message that they've been logged out. And at this point, they can click on the please log in, and you'll see here in the response, the data turbo has been turned off. I could have also done I think a data turbo target top. I'm not exactly sure what that is offhand. Here, if they click the link, they go back to the login. The other option that we have perhaps within the frame is to not just do the oops page, the unauthorized page, but also send back an inline turbo stream action. Let's clear the network activity again, and let's see what happens. We're back on the login page automatically, and what we can see is on our oops page, let's expand this, we have our turbo frame, we have the same message that we saw before, but this time we have an inline turbo stream operation that performs a visit to the login page on the top level page. It doesn't provide any kind of frame information. So essentially this is attempting to do what we were doing on the top level with the location call, except it's doing it via a turbo stream. So that's another option. Let's take a look at how this is being handled under the hood. So as I mentioned before, I have this oops page, which is sort of my hard-coded 401 unauthorized response. And essentially it's bifurcated. There's a what happens when we're making a request to the top level page, right, outside of any turbo frame. And that's the first thing that we check here. If we're not inside of a turbo frame, in that case, it's pretty easy to handle the unauthorized request. All we have to do is redirect back to the login page. That's the same as a vanilla ColdFusion application, nothing special to see here. If we are in a turbo frame, that's where, again, things get a little bit more interesting. Here I have my Boolean for sending the inline stream, and that's just the difference between this oops page and this oops page. And send back the 401 unauthorized. Because we're in the context of a frame, we have to include the frame ID. If we don't, let's just put like an XXX in the middle here, and let's try to go to this. What you'll see is you'll get that content missing. So we don't want to show that to the user. That's a pretty bad user experience. Let's put that back in. And let's just try that again, right? That's how we make sure that we get that right message. So we have to echo out the frame ID, and this frame information is being passed to Hotwire, or to ColdFusion via Hotwire, right? Let's come back here and let's do this. And if we look at this and we look at the headers, what we can see in the request headers, there it is that Turbo Drive is sending the my frame ID in this header, And that's what we're echoing out here to make sure that we get that alignment regardless of what frame is actually making this request within the ColdFusion application. Here we're hard coding that logged out message. And then here, if we've decided to include the use stream, we are including this turbo stream. This is a custom turbo stream action. This is not something that is provided by Hotwire out of the box. I have another blog post that looks at this. It basically just turns around and calls a turbo.visit on its own. But yeah, so let's just take a quick look at the authenticated page. This is essentially, this page is the authenticated page, and it just represents the logged in state for the particular user. And you can see I have this this version here variable, and that's just determining which page we're on, the home versus the activity versus the profile. That's the thing that's getting logged out here. And then we just have the two sets of links. Again, here's the V for the different versions of the page. And here it's essentially the same exact links, except this time it's being scoped to that turbo frame so we can see what happens when we have to handle an unauthorized request in the context of a turbo frame. And I'm pretty pleased with this approach. I think this works pretty well and has a lot of flexibility. Granted, the 401 unauthorized response is a explicit response from our server, but there may be other types of responses that we didn't anticipate, like a 503 service unavailable, or a 528 gateway, 508 gateway timeout, something like that. Something that's not going to actually be from ColdFusion. We'll have to handle those, and that's going to be something I look at in future posts. But for now, I'm kind of liking this approach.